again from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Josh Manning, Deputy Managing Editor for Assignment here at the Western Journal. Joining me today on my left, Brian Chai. The only man who knows Brian Chai's title is Brian Chai, and it is...
The Grand Pooh Bear.
Grand Pooh, that's
Grand
fine.
Poobah.
He's director of something.
No, Grand Pooh Bear.
He's director of something.
Publishing operations.
There it is. And on my right... Cracker Jack reporter and administrator and manager of features and has his own staff, Andrew J. Shasha. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us on this action-packed Monday. There is an enormous amount going on in the news today right now. I will tell you that the Western Journal site, we're getting about double our recent traffic right now. There is lots going on. So if you have another monitor or your browser open, keep watching us, but also jump over to westernjournal.com and see the latest news. 3 things we want to visit with you about today. First off, Trump made news over the weekend, well, right at the beginning of the weekend when he appeared on Wayne Allen Root's show. And Wayne had a suggestion for him. Maybe instead of running for the presidency in 2024, maybe he should consider the Senate. Or pardon me, there had been talk about the Senate. Wayne brought up the idea of running for the House. There's some very interesting implications that go along with that, including potential impeachment for Biden, which is really interesting to think about. Past that, we're also going to be talking about Biden, the great unity bringer, and where the unity is that he has brought, that he has or hasn't brought, perhaps. And then also we want to talk about a little bit of sports. I'm not really a sports guy, but these two guys follow a little bit, Brian especially.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about a recent incident between Mexican and American soccer players and the repercussions of that just in general. But first off, I want to talk with you about this idea as far as Trump maybe running for the House and what he could do there. Now, our own Eric Nanneman, normally our business writer, he actually jumped into this and wrote this piece earlier today. I'm going to read you a few lines from it just to get the point across, and then we'll discuss. Last week, former President Donald Trump described as, quote, interesting the idea of his running for a Florida seat in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2022. Now conservative booster Rogan O'Handley, better known as DC Drano, is putting forth an idea to take things even a step further. The scenario, which O'Handley freely admits is crazy, is to have Trump impeach Joe Biden. It goes something like this. Trump runs for the House of Representatives in 2022. A red wave brings the House under the control of the Republicans. I don't think that's very far-fetched. Trump is elected Speaker of the House, replacing Nancy Pelosi. Okay, maybe a little more far-fetched. But, look, if there's a red wave, boom, then he controls a branch of the federal government and can push to impeach Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris both. As the Speaker of the House, Trump would be next in line for the presidency. According to the 22nd Amendment, he can still run for POTUS in 2024. Now, that is not exactly a triple crown or a hat trick, but it would be pretty darn close. If you can leave the presidency, run for the House, get the speakership, impeach the guy you ran against, and then replace him the next year. That's actually more than a hat trick. That's actually about four
impressive.
crazy triumphs. So fact is often stranger than fiction, and that's the kind of thing that I suppose could happen. We wouldn't look for it to happen, but then we never look for crazy things that happen in politics to happen. So, fellas, let's put the impeachment piece of it aside for a moment. We can revisit that in a second. Let's talk just about Trump in 2022. There's been talk about a Senate run. There's been talk about a House run. What do you think, Andrew?
I think a Senate run is at least mildly likely. I don't really think either.
You think mildly likely?
I think it's mildly likely. Yeah. Okay. Not necessarily. However, I think congressional race, probably off the table. And in this, I almost feel bad for Trump. Trump is a man of grandiosity. He is a man of biggest. Everything is bigly. Everything is hugely.
Tremendous.
Everything is tremendous and amazing and huge, and it has to be bigger than the last thing.
Yep.
So when you become one of the best businessmen in the world, you have to become president. after you become president, there's nothing else to do. Like, he's done it all. Like,
Yeah,
there's
legislator
nothing else
doesn't
to do. Like, just a
feel-
legislator, unless
Like
you're pursuing
SCOTUS.
something like this. Yeah.
SCOTUS, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
There's talk about
Yes.
that with Obama.
Yes. But other than that, I don't see him bringing himself down to that level to just be a part of the 435 person horse race in Washington after being able to be in charge of the country.
What do you think, Ryan?
I think Andrew definitely has a point. I do think like it would be very strange. Like I don't like they're not even the same position, so you can't really call it demotion. But just for lack of a better term, like it
It's
would
kind
feel-
of a
everything's but a demotion,
yeah, from the most powerful man
Yeah.
on
In
the
the
face
world
of the
to
earth
a
down
legislator.
to
Yeah, so it
hanging out with AOC
Yeah.
and Presley
Not-
and them. I mean,
no.
it's not. Yeah,
So it's sort of like I definitely see that. I think Trump would struggle with that, but on the flip side, I also think Trump is big on winning, and I think if he feels like he can get a legitimate shot at winning whatever House, Congress, whatever Senate, whatever it ends up looking like, Trump winning is. I mean, that's just good for him. Like, he loves that.
I think that almost just brings kind of more credence to the idea that it would be a presidential run if he's going to run at all in the next 4 years. Because if there's anything Trump likes, it's winning. And the idea that, oh, well, I lost, or at least even if you don't agree with the fact that you lost, there's a perception in the country that you lost. You're going to step down to a lower rung and try to win it. It's like, no, I'm going to go back and win again. And it's like, don't get me wrong, I don't think the man. I think the man loves the country. I think he wanted to do a good job as president. But I think that at this point, the only reason to run again is to win, because last time you lost and you can't go out on a loss.
what do you think?
I agree. I'm always torn on the idea of Donald Trump and what he can be for the Republican Party, down the road.
Yeah.
And I can't give, I can't remember who tweeted this out, but someone mentioned I think Trump would make a better kingmaker than king.
Yes.
And that struck a chord with me because Trump did so many things right, but so much of it is just washed away by people who blame for January 6th, people who
The narrative,
yeah,
just
the narrative.
yeah, the
And-
weight of the narrative.
Yeah, and I feel like if Trump comes back, that narrative will probably only get the weight of that narrative will only get 50 times worse. Which isn't to say and like I said, Trump's agenda I was very for. It was a genuine America first agenda.
Yeah.
And I think the part that I always have to grapple is how do we get that back without because whether you love Trump or hate Trump, you feel one of those things. I feel like he's such a polarizing figure.
Yeah.
And I would venture to bet that if we injected truth serum into the 80 million people who vote for Biden, the vast majority of them would have said, I would have voted for a tree stump as long as it was opposing Trump.
Yeah.
So Trump, just his existence elicits that response, and I'm always struggling. Like it's power. Like how does the Republican Party grapple with that power?
So that makes me want to ask a question about DeSantis, but I'm not going to because the segment's on Trump, and I have I think a more interesting question. So Andrew. Trump runs in 2022. He gets the House. Does he become an unbelievable deal maker in the House? I mean, this is the guy who got the Arabs. Not if you heard that on camera, a screw just fell out of one of our chairs. I'm hoping it was Brian's chair, and
If I fall over,
he'll just sort of slump over here in a moment. But I mean, this is the guy who was able to get the Abraham Accords across. He literally had. He literally had peace in the Middle East, at least as far as Israel was concerned. Does he become a deal maker and a broker, or is he so bombastic that he isolates himself?
Man, I like some of the other questions you forwarded before the show better. This is a tough question because I don't think he's a Washington deal maker. And I think that was the benefit of this America First agenda, this outsider look, is that as the president, as the executive, as someone at the top of a co-equal branch, he got to be the businessman that he was in the business world, a little bit more reined in, but he got to be that. And that's kind of why those deals got through, these executive mechanisms, with the DOJ and with the military. He could do those things on the world stage I don't think he could pull it off in Washington because I think, like Brian said here, half of Washington can't stand the man and half of them loves him. And, there's that 20% maybe in the middle there, but most are very polarized on this man. And so the idea that he's going to go into the congressional branch and he's going to be the deal maker that he got to be when he was in charge. It's not as likely. The mechanisms aren't there for him to kind of play those wheels.
And he had an enormous amount of business leverage and once in Congress. Now there's no telling what he knows about the people in Congress. So there's maybe some dark sort of leverage there, but I think that's a really good assessment. So I think that means the Speaker of the House idea is probably a little bit far-fetched. It's a lot of fun to think about. And
totally, it's hilarious.
Really strange things have happened. I mean, we played out his talk about against all odds. And we played out a million crazy scenarios in our newsroom before the election, trying to figure out, look, what if this comes down to one vote, or what if it comes down to no votes? And then you end up actually having Pence count the vote. And we said so many times, oh, it's not going to come down to this. It's not going to come down. Well, it kind of came down to it. So stranger things have happened. Not many, but stranger things have happened. It would be an interesting idea for him to launch a presidential run from the House and essentially just use the well to do nothing but campaign. Just try to be on C-SPAN 24/7 and watch
maybe
it.
That's
the platform he needs back.
How much fun would it be to watch Trump just nonstop throw bombs at representatives
on the floor?
C-SPAN ratings would go through the roof.
C-SPAN ratings would go. It would be the new Twitter. It would be the new Twitter. It would just Trump unfiltered. Just filibuster. You can't filibuster in the House, but I'm sure he'd be trying to change the rules in the Senate. It would be really interesting. But all right. Fun idea there. We want to shift from Trump over to Biden, and we want to talk about the unbelievable amount of unity Joe Biden has brought to America, to Washington, D.C., and the Middle East. Andrew, tell us, he was the candidate of unity. He was going to bring the country back together, darn it. And now he's got high-powered munitions flying back and forth in the Middle East. Apparently white supremacists are everywhere now.
They're in the bushes.
Waiting to attack Brian because he's Asian. Where's the unity?
I've been waiting to attack Brian.
You guys remember the commercial? Where's the beef? The little old lady in the Burger King commercial. Where's the beef? Where's the unity? Darn it! Where's the unity, Andrew?
Well, it's not here. President Biden has, for all intents and purposes, been Mr. Do Nothing, pretty much. He came in and you're right. I think part of it was, I don't think anyone got behind Joe Biden. Very few people were like, yes, Joe Biden is my charismatic leader. He wasn't Barack Obama. He didn't bring something new to the table like Donald Trump.
He wasn't Trump.
Yeah. And so, he wasn't Trump. And so the only message he really had was, I'm going to unite the country. I'm going to be the opposite of Trump in that I'm going to, I'm going to rule with love. I'm going to, there's going to be unicorns and rainbows in Washington. It's going to be beautiful. Of course, that hasn't happened.
It's better than the seas not rising anymore. I like it better than that.
On the Western Journal website today, I believe today actually it came out, an op-ed entitled, "As America is More Divided Than Ever, We're Still Waiting on Biden to deliver his, quote, magical unity." Fantastic headline. Excellent story. I'm actually kind of going to probably...
Did you write the headline for it?
No, I didn't write the headline. I didn't write the headline, I swear. No, it was really, really well crafted. And the piece is really well crafted. I would recommend everyone at home actually go and give that a read. I'm about to disagree with it, but it is worth a read. My question, however, is really whether or not, particularly with that first part of the headline, is America... This contention gets made every couple of years. We're more divided than ever. And of course, then they do, the Gallup polling and the data and they're like, well, we're about as divided as we were during the Civil War. And it's just, these metrics are very strange, first of all, but I don't want to get into the math behind it. What I really want to ask is, are we really more divided than ever? We brought this up before the show. Historically, at the nation's founding, right after the founding, the way the founding fathers jockeyed for authority and who was going to lead the country once the country was formed. One of my favorite things to bring up when people say, politics before Donald Trump, it was classy, it was loving, it was real. And John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were Thomas Jefferson was throwing you're a hermaphroditic little androgynous bug at John Adams in the election cycle. It's always been dirty. So I really want to know, are we really more divided than ever?
The trans agenda existed even then. My gosh.
Are we? I don't think we are.
As our representative of the Asian community.
Here we go.
What do you think?
As far as just the general division, I want to say, I guess the optimist in me would like to think that we are not more divided than we've ever been, but it feels that way because we've never been more connected than we've ever been. So all it takes is, if there are 10 people in the world who are genuine, pro-Nazi, neo-Nazis, if those 10 people go on social media and just blast their rhetoric out, it's going to feel so much bigger than the actual, there are these 10 crazy guys in the middle of nowhere. Let's ignore, but we can't because of that connectivity. I guess that's my answer is, not having anything to do with Biden, but just in general, I actually do think we are not nearly as divided as we used to be. And I'm going to actually tie this back real quick. I actually think that's because of Trump. Because I think when it comes
bold
to
statements getting made.
Yes, I know.
Bold statements,
it is a bold statement
everywhere.
I think you can back it up.
No, so the idea with Trump is that he just didn't care about that political correctness, and I think people genuinely appreciate not feeling like you're walking on eggshells around them. I think that's just general human emotion, as opposed to when you look at the left, Biden, Democrats. They don't want it, they want everything to be covered in eggshells, and just that sort of that ability, whether it's a little brash or, this is going to sound so negative, but, somewhat kind of uncouth the way Trump used to do things. At least there was a certain level of autonomy and respect he would give another individual.
Hey, we Northeasterners, we tell it how it is. That's just the way that it is.
The word vulgar essentially means just really commonplace.
Yes.
And it's remarkable that they never actually said that about Trump. It wasn't a commonly used word, but it's one that actually could have been applied to him in a legitimate, it sounds like a very negative word, but he talked to people in a very common parlance.
Yep.
They understood. He did all of this politispeak where you get up there and you can tell with him when the politician when he's at the podium and the lights turn on and the voice changes and just kind of the mannerisms change and everything. I don't know what's there. It's not the person who inhabits that body. It's something else. Trump, I mean, clearly he was the same with the lights on and the lights off.
Yeah. I think, again, just juxtaposing that again, talking about how Biden brings unity. Well, you look at what Trump did just in terms of, again, I'm being a dead horse here. The way Trump treated minorities, he treated them as if they did not need a helping hand.
Yeah, he treated them like they were Americans.
Just everyone else.
Americans.
And I think what you hear from, when you hear from, the Jamel Hills or the, whoever, leftist pundits out there in the world, when you hear from them, because of that kind of social media age we live in, it feels like they are so much more bigger than they are.
Good.
But I would venture to bet, and we've probably had this conversation on this show, I am very comfortable saying that America as a whole, I think, is center-leaning right. You would never be able to tell that if you were trying to judge America based on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah. But I think America as a whole is center-leaning right.
All right, that is excellent. I have got a different take on that. It doesn't contradict yours, but a little bit different take. I don't think it's the case that we're more divided percentage-wise than we've ever been. I think it's the quality of the divide that's the issue. At least Hamilton and Adams were pro-America.
Yes.
They wanted America to succeed. Whereas you've got now the vocal group that shows up in social media that Brian's talking about. These are not people who want America to succeed. You know, a couple of years ago, we made the conscious choice at the Western Journal to try to stop referring to liberals when what we meant was leftists. They're different things. Leftists want statism. They want centralized power. They hate America. Liberals don't necessarily want that. They're normally just a little more liberal than conservatives are. But they're normally pro-America. They love the country. They want to support the country. But the Democrat Party has left liberals behind. It is embracing leftism. And so the divide maybe is not bigger, but the type of divide is way more dangerous. Because you've got a group of people. You were talking about Jamel Hill, or however you say her name. She was talking about Manchin's vote on, I think it was on HR 1. It was on HR 1. And the opening of her message said, "This is so typical for this country." And then it went on to talk about how supposedly black people showed up at the polls to try to change things, and now white people are trying to pull the rug out from under them. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, no, that's very atypical for this country. It is incredibly typical of most of the rest of the world, but it was the U.S. and it was Britain that stamped out slavery. It's not typical for this country. And they absolutely do hate it. And then the other piece, we're going way long here, but the other piece of this, so quality of the divide over quantity of the divide. And then there was an old, the Marxists used to say, one of you guys will maybe remember this, the Marxists used to say, look, we don't need a majority. We only really need about 1% of the people to lead about 10% of the people around. If we can get 9% following that 1%, we've got you. And when you look at the divide, you know, arguably it's 20-20, 60. Well, that 20, that's a lot more. That's double 10%. That is a terrifying, terrifying thing. So that's a great question. And then the question becomes, how do you coexist with people who fundamentally hate the country? I don't know what you do with that. I don't know where we've ever seen that before, and I'm sure some of you historians out there know the answer to that. Where has there ever been a country that actually hated itself? I mean, what do you do with that? That's how do you recover from that? I don't know. I don't know.
And that leads
Yet
to...
they won't leave. Yet they won't leave.
Not. No,
this is so...
Everyone's coming here.
She says this is so typical for this country. And then she stays here. Go, if it's so typical for this country, that means it's not typical in other countries. Go there. Go there. All right. Sorry.
No. And
one last point.
It brings about the other question, which is that can anyone actually... I don't know if this is the most effective line of attack. And I did it briefly after the election where I would be like, oh, the unity president doing this to hurt conservatives. It's like a funny it's just a quick off-the-cuff little remark. It's like, oh, this is funny. This is a good joke. But is it an effective strategy? Like, I don't know if I think that this is the best way to hit Joe Biden, because like what you're saying is it's so accurate. Not only are we now divided, but we are divided on foundation, not simply on values or solutions. So is there anyone who can unite the country? Is anyone going to look at this guy and go, oh, he can't unite the country, what a bum? It's like, well, could you?
So it's not steer the boat this way or that way. It's we want to steer the boat this way, and they want to scuttle it while we're on it. It's unbelievably dangerous and self-destructive. And I don't know what you do with that, because if you're on a ship, you throw them overboard. But I would like to not do that. And also, I don't know where there's another Australia that we could send those people to.
What a shame.
So,
the moon?
To the moon. To the moon, Alice. To one of these days. All right. So, shifting from that, let's talk a little bit about international affairs, maybe a soupçon of race and some soccer. Yes, that's right.
That's
it's okay.
absurd.
It's not a horrible soccer story. It's actually an interesting soccer story.
Yeah.
Take it away, Brian.
So on Sunday, Team USA beat Team Mexico in the Nation League's championship
Those
final.
white supremacists beating those Mexicans. Oh my gracious.
There was some controversy because of some calls a ref made towards the end, but I mean, largely, it was a game that Mexico lost. It became a much bigger deal because of just the vulgarity, the throwing of objects at Team USA.
That's a note for me, not for you. You don't have to talk about a boat analogy right now, Brian. I was making that note for me.
But yeah, so and there was a point where they were chanting, slurs in.
And how does this relate to boats?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to see how you make that connection later on.
Move that over there.
So, just kind of an overall ugly situation overall. But the reason that story made me think was, and this was presented as a sports story, but it's going to expand to cover the human condition.
Oh boy.
But
A soupçon of the human condition.
Yes, exactly. I've been noticing it's becoming more and more prevalent, this issue in sports, and you can extrapolate this to real life, of people who feel emboldened to say things that they never would if it weren't behind a keyboard, if they weren't a fan in an event. And this seems to be getting worse, like by the second getting worse. So I guess my first question, I do want to address the sports part real quick, but do you guys think as paying fans, so one of the things that happened, aside from the derogatory slur chant, a fan chucked what looked like a pretty full water bottle at a player, clipped him in the side of the face. Obviously, I think the player's fine, but that's not going to feel good.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you guys think? If you are a paying fan, it doesn't have to be sports; it can be any event, honestly. But as a paying fan, where is this coming from to feel so emboldened? Where I would never throw a water ball at a human being. That's treating someone as subhuman. How does paying whatever amount of money that you needed to buy a ticket, how does that justify? What do you guys think? Where's this mindset coming from in today's society? As if you guys don't think it's a problem that's getting worse, please tell me. I think it is, but where do you think? Why do you think it's getting worse today?
Wow. My go-to, and I don't know if this is contrived or not, it has to be just the last year. I have to have this feeling that when we talk about prisoners, and part of this is because of prison culture, so I'm not saying your home is like a prison or it's the qualities of a prison, but when you cage an animal or when you put people in prison and then they come out, they don't behave the way that you would behave in the generalized society because you have been socialized in a way worse condition, in a way more private condition. You put people away for a year in their homes. You don't let them interact with one another. You frustrate the hell out of them. You fire them from their jobs. You ruin the global economy for a year. And, the violent crime is on the rise in the United States. We see this, one of my degrees is in criminology. This is something where in the summer, you see that crime rises. The joke is always, there's a correlation between ice cream sales and crime rising in the summer. But ice cream doesn't make you more violent. The summer, more people interacting, being out together after being trapped all winter makes you more violent, more antagonistic, and it makes people butt heads more. This is that on a scale of 1,000. You've trapped people for a year, ruined their lives in certain instances, and then just said, all right, go back to your business. Go back to the way things were. You're going to have nothing but violent clashes, outbursts, and people behaving poorly because they've been treated like children for a year, and now they're going to act like children on the streets.
That's interesting. I, as you know, don't follow sport. I mean, Brian, I don't know. I don't know enough about these things and haven't followed them close enough. I do know that British soccer hooliganism has been a thing for a long time. I do know there are some venues where if you can walk out without having urine thrown at you or poured on you at some point, it's a good day. Yeah. I think I don't know. Mine's a kind of a boring answer, I guess. I think a lot of this is just the ultimate movement away from kind of Victorian values and these, we were essentially founded by Puritans who were very, very proper, who really had rules for doing everything. And there was something of a biblical foundation to a whole lot of that. And I think as we stray farther from that, senses of propriety get confused. And there's also just a question of being carnal, just being dominated by the flesh. You see this is a lot older than, but I agree with what you're saying about COVID. This is a lot older than COVID too. And, where you've seen it for about 100 years now is in automobiles. You surround somebody in a steel cage and man, you want to know what somebody's like on the inside?
Yeah.
Stick them in a car and cut them off.
Stick him in a car and put him in LA.
I had a friend who used to say, what's down in the well comes up in the bucket.
Yeah.
And man, the stuff that comes up in the bucket there is bad.
Yeah.
So people, when they're behind a keyboard or when they're in a car, when they think there's no consequences, they behave differently. And maybe that's the case. Maybe it's a crowd mentality thing where they think, I'm one of many. How are they going to pick me out?
For sure.
We know some of that happens when you're dealing with protests that turn to riots and those things.
Not to mention alcohol sales on the rise and at these events, like sporting events. I'm not saying people didn't used to go drink at bars and go to sporting events and go to Disney World and drink or go to, theme parks. But now it's like, okay, Disney World, every park now has alcohol. Yeah. They're selling beers like hotcakes at these like athletic events and far more than they used to, like en masse. It's like you've got a bunch of angry, passionate drunks in a mob.
The left solution to that, by the way, will be to increase cannabis sales at all of those locations to balance everything out. Yes.
I don't know if that could
let's get everyone as drunk and drugged as possible. That's where it's an easy group of people to dominate.
Yeah.
Bread and circus.
Yeah.
Bread and circus.
So I get the last question I'll leave with you guys. On one, I like to leave our audience with some hope and optimism after our sling of topics today. But what do you guys think is the best way that America can kind of overcome this ugliness that has become so prevalent? Because I don't want to think that this ugliness will prevail. I don't want to think that this is America, period. And again, I know this story was originally about international soccer fans, but it just made me think of the broader topic of our country.
So there's a story, I think it was de Tocqueville when he was traveling around, recounted, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there watching is going to know this, but I think de Tocqueville recorded, he was in a bar or a hotel or something like that. And it was a social center, and he was watching the women interact there. And he noted that they like cursed like sailors. They were really rough around the edges. But man, they were scrupulously honest. They absolutely, they had they were so committed to values that maybe we can say really matter. And not to say that clean language isn't a good thing. It is a good thing. But there are things that are more important than that. Yes. And I think so America's always been a little bit rough around the edges in some ways. Yep. I mean, we're kind of a cowboy nation. Yep. We were built on the frontier and by pioneers and those things. And so I guess the rowdiness wouldn't bother me as much if we re-embraced the truth the way we needed to and those sorts of things. But revival is the answer to that question. I hate to step on what you might say, but revival, Christ, I think that's the only way that you restore that.
Yeah, no, totally.
Either that or everybody carrying a gun everywhere. That's the other thing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Not to mention, it's like, so I grew up in a house with my mom and my grandparents, and then my great grandfather was around, and so greatest generation, and Vietnam era folks, boomers. And so at the end of the day, I look back particularly at my great grandfather and the greatest generation. Those guys were rough around the edges, blue collar guys. They worked hard. They were totally rough. They were vulgar. Yeah. Absolutely, you're right. But they had the right values to fall back on. So when they were tough for the right reasons. And when they were loving for the right reasons. And, and so part of it's values. It doesn't matter how the nation's gruffness and vulgarity. To me, it's not a problem as long as the right things undergird it. Because sometimes you need a tough person to get along. That's what built this country.
Absolutely.
But they need to be undergirded by the right foundation.
That's an interesting thing. I think there is, and if I might be reading too much into the scripture here. I don't know. I do think there's a reason Christ was a carpenter, though. Yeah. You know, the images we get of him from the Middle Ages are kind of effeminate and weak and just very weak looking. You know, this guy is a Middle Eastern carpenter in 30 AD.
Yeah.
This is a tough guy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who's moving big stuff around, who's beating massive pegs into massive beams. This is a big guy. And there is a place for masculinity. It is unbelievably important. I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that, forgive me if I'm quoting him wrong, but this is essentially it. God is clearly masculine. God is a penetrating presence. And I think there's something to that. And Lewis also, when he wrote on chivalry, he used Lancelot as the example. So here's a guy who could go out and he could slay a dragon. He could fight off the Black Knight. He was unbelievably tough and brutal and vicious if needed. But he'd also come back to court and sit at the round table and behave well. That's what we need. That's what we want. That's what men need to be. We can close out on this thought. I was thinking about it over the weekend. As many of you guys know, there was a hijacking attempt that was thwarted over the weekend. I think it was Friday. It might have been Saturday. But a guy went nuts, banging on the cockpit door, trying to get in. A group of people got him down on the ground, got him zip tied, got him restrained. And I was looking at the pictures of it, and it was all men who were there. And, you know, because I use kind of a quasi Marxist lens to look through things just to see what the other side's saying. And it just occurred to me, there are no women in there. There were no women in there. It was all men. And you know what? It was all men for a reason. That's what men are built to do. Men are built to stop other stupid human beings from doing really dangerous things. Among others, we're also good at lifting things and reaching things on high shelves. But we are different for a reason. Yep. We are different for a reason. And God, I had a pastor who used to say, God made us separate that he might make us one. That is how he intended it, male and female coming together. But anyway, that's it for the day. Thank you guys for sticking with us. You have stuck with us through the day. It's been great viewership. We appreciate it. Thank you for staying tuned in. Thank you also for checking out content at westernjournal.com. We appreciate it. When you do that, you are helping support us. You are funding journalism that actually matters, and you are funding a news and commentary organization that actually calls it the way it is. I'm in charge of the assignment team here, and I tell our team members, listen, what you want to do is get underneath the story, find out what's actually going on there, and then tell our readers about it, because that's what they appreciate. They want to be talked to in a plain, honest manner. If you feel inclined to support us more directly than just browsing and just watching, we would love it. Go to westernjournal.com/join. That's westernjournal.com/join. We actually have a Flag Day special going on there where you will get a discount. And we are running that through Flag Day, is my understanding. That makes sense for a Flag Day discount. We've got a good deal for you, waiting for you over there. We've also got some nice perks that go along with memberships to the Western Journal, where you are teaming up with us. You are directly funding stories, journalism, writers who are the next generation of conservative thought leaders. That's what we are trying to do here. That's what we are trying to do. Develop the next generation that's going to keep up this fight and hopefully keep the world safe and free for your children and grandchildren. That's the goal. That's going to be it for us for today. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Also, If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button. After that, you can click the little bell. That's going to make sure you get notified when we go live. For Brian, for Andrew, for everybody else here at the Western Journal and WJ Live, I'm Josh Manning. Thank you, and we're going to see you Wednesday. Hey, guys. Huge story. We need a fresh card. Let's red label it. Roll as fast as we can.
All right, on it. Sounds good. All right, guys, we got a red label breaking story. Can we get a picture for that? And can we try to get that out in the next 20 minutes? I want eyes on it as soon as possible.
On it, Joe. 2 more minutes and we'll be live.
Sam, we're going to need a slot for that story, so figure out what you want to bump. Ashley, we're going to want to translate it into Spanish yesterday.
Sí, señor. We can slide it in at 2:30. It should be going out here in about 10 minutes.